Welcome to part 9 of Cloud9 A Look Back. Today I'm joined by Josh Micks, the former assistant coach of Cloud9 for both the South African lineup and for the Colossus. So first, Josh, let's talk about your decision to stay with Cloud9. At what point in building the roster did Cloud9 and Henry kind of approach you in potentially staying on with Cloud9?
It was pretty much right away. It's kind of a funny story because there's like a lot of meetings on like Mondays or so. Like, there would always be a meeting. Usually it'd just be about like content or something, right? Just like content for the week.
Hmm.
And so that meeting I was like doing I think I was like working on like prep or something. So content never involved me. So I was just like, if it's anything important, just message me after.
Hmm.
It was like, because I figured it was just nothing. And then
Hmm.
like an hour later or something, I'm just seeing like messages and like weird messages in like the group chat, like, well, boys, we'll stick together or something. I was like, what happens? And then I found out what was going on. I was like, oh,
Hmm.
that's interesting. And then kind of like after that, I kind of knew probably what I had. So I knew Henry was like already like kind of doing everything. So
Hmm.
I was like, all right, new team, don't know what's gonna happen. I'll message Henry, see what's up. And then from there, he just kind of told me to. I made this like document for him about like kind of like myself and like my CS stuff and all that shit, just to kind of like show like what I can do and stuff. And then from that point on, it was just kind of all right, cool, you are analyst. And then I didn't really hear much for the next like 2 months.
Oh, cool. So you were
Yeah,
pretty early.
yeah.
Okay.
So like I was pretty early, yeah.
So were you might have been before Alex and Kassad. Yeah or
I
no?
think I'm pretty sure they had those two like already signed at the
Oh, okay.
time. I think they had been like working on this for a bit, and then I think Kassad for sure was there already, and I'm
Hmm.
pretty sure I think Alex might have been,
Okay.
or he might have like joined afterwards, but I think he was like already like
In the works.
like slated to join. Yeah, so at least that's how I think it went down. I'm not too sure because I wasn't too involved, but I'm pretty sure Kassad was already there,
Hmm.
and I'm pretty sure Alex pretty much was.
Okay. So at the time the South African lineup hadn't found a home, was there ever like a possibility of you staying with them? Or is it like the second Cloud9 came up, you just stayed on?
Um, Yeah, I mostly stayed on because my two options at that point were either maybe see what's going on with C9 Valorant,
Mm.
um, which looking back on it, maybe I should have looked into that more, considering how that experience went. And
Mm.
then yeah, they were like looking for like a new org, but I didn't really know if they were going to be able to like find anything. And then eventually like the extra salt theme came, but even then it's like I don't know how much funding or like money they would have had to like keep me on,
Hmm.
especially like on um if like I don't think I would have been able to be on like the same salary that I was on C9. So it
Hmm.
wasn't really much of an option for me because they weren't having a ton of luck with like orgs and stuff at the time. So for
Hmm.
me, it was pretty much mostly stay in C9 and maybe I was pretty content just because I wanted to stay in CSGO at the time and like Cloud9 CSGO seemed like a pretty safe spot to be. So I was like, this is where I want to be. C9 CSGO, it's fun, doing something new, exciting. So fuck it, I'll stick here and see where it goes. And then obviously Floppy ended up joining, so that kind of like left one person kind of like still on the team. So
Yeah, someone you
yeah,
knew.
for the most part, it was pretty much just you know, I was pretty content with staying with C9 at the time on CS:GO.
So you were an analyst with Tion before they joined Cloud9, and then came with them as an assistant coach, and then went back to an analyst on the Colossus, and then were promoted to an assistant coach again on Cloud9. So how does your role change when you're an analyst and then being promoted to assistant coach? How does that kind of what does that shift look
It's
like?
it's weird because it's not really like a set change or anything. It feels more just like a title and maybe just
Mm.
like a little bit more respect involved if you're like an assistant coach. But even then, it's like I don't think it's like necessarily that important in terms of like what your title is between those two. But like for me, like I just kind of like having like the coach in my title just because like it's kind of how I feel, what I am, what I want to be.
Yeah.
And so before, like with like working with Tion as an analyst, mostly I was just kind of like considered an analyst because I wasn't like contracted or anything. I was kind of just like on ATK. I wasn't like paid or anything. I was just kind of like helping them
Oh,
out,
okay.
traveling with. I was like traveling with them. They like bought my plane ticket to LA for Pro League, which was nice, and they got me like a hotel room and stuff. So they were paying for me to travel with them, and then obviously we qualified for Denmark, so I got to go with them. Um, so yeah, I was kind of just traveling with them, helping them out with like prep and stuff, giving advice and stuff. And then so once like I was joining in like a more set manner on C9, Tion also knew that I kind of just preferred the title of assistant coach, so that's kind of like what they offered to me. Um, and then kind of I went back down to like analyst on the Colossus, and like when Kassad was there, like the first 3 months of the Colossus, I wasn't really involved in anything at all. I was just
Mm,
like, all right, do anti strats, maybe see like what Kassad wants me to help with, but things I wasn't really doing much, especially at the start.
okay.
Um, and then like so Kassad left, and then I really pushed for Elma Putty at first, like when they first started going through names and like say, all right, who maybe should we consider for a coaching spot? Elma Putty was like the one that I messaged Henry about and pushed really hard for to like give an interview and kind of talk to and see. Um, and then so because like I pushed for Elma Putty and he was joining, and Elma wanted me to be like his assistant coach to kind of just wait till Henry, so that's kind of just what it became. And then kind of like with the Elma Putty version of the roster, I was just a bit expected to be a bit more involved. So at practice, during scrims like every day, um, just kind of having like a lot more say. I
Mm-hmm.
still kind of struggled with that role because I was still trying to like flesh it out in terms of I do better if I kind of know like what people want me to do, especially as like an assistant coach, like what's going to help them, kind of like in terms of like specific things, rather than just like if you see something, then you can say something. It didn't really help me too
Mm,
much because it's like Alex is there and Elbow Putty. I don't want to like step on people's toes, and I don't know like what they want help with and stuff. So that was still something I was like trying to figure out at the time in terms of like I still think it needs to be fleshed out as well. It's just like the assistant coach and like analyst role in general to just get the
mm-hmm.
most out of it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. So under Casada, you were more like just doing NA strats and just bringing them information, and they would just kind of take it or leave it.
yeah, pretty much.
Okay. And then
Yeah,
with Elmo Putty as the assistant, you at least had like some more say,
yeah,
or were like
yeah,
at least more involved in the day to day.
yeah. And I was like expected to be more involved, so I
Okay.
was like more involved with like the staff and stuff, all that shit.
So are you like part of the scrims and stuff like that, or like
Yeah, as
again like in
assistant
like the
coach, I
comms?
was
Okay.
pretty much every day. Analyst towards the end, I was starting to do it more. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
do it at first just because I didn't. There wasn't really anything for me to do, I guess. And also, it's easier for me to like focus on anti strats sometimes. Like especially on that schedule, like 1 a.m. to 9 a.m. If we had like a match the next day, I would usually just chill and just kind of work my anti strats, maybe watch scrims in Discord or something, just to
Mm-hmm.
have enough time to do it properly. But yeah, I was mostly in scrims every day when I was the assistant coach.
Okay. Cool. Did you ever want, or were you ever considering trying to become the head coach when Kassad left?
I never like seriously considered it. After I like advocated strongly for Elma, I kind of put my own name in there for Henry, but that was more because I didn't really expect to be seriously considered or anything, especially as like as an analyst, right? That was like kind of all they saw of me, and I wasn't like too involved because that version of the team, like I just wasn't like involved at all,
Mm-hmm.
and so I didn't like expect at all to get like considered really. I kind of just did it just more so like as like a personal thing, just kind of like um, it just helped myself just to kind of like reach out and kind of like put my own name out there for like my own confidence and stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was mostly just more about that, just like doing it to do it rather than really expecting to push the role. I would say I probably pushed more for like Elma Putty than I did even myself. I just kind of like wanted to
Mm-hmm.
throw my own name in there.
Yeah. So how much say did you and maybe Elma or Kassad have in the term of like the team structure and like kind of decisions? Because I didn't see a big shift between Kassad and Elma, at least in like kind of how they play. I'm assuming a lot of that is dictated by Alex, just like on his play style and the way he plays the game. So how much like kind of say did you have in the kind of like structure? Or how does that look like?
Um, it would also be kind of like map dependent as well. So like say when Elma Putty came in, we started playing Train, which Alex hadn't played in like forever. So like on that map, it was pretty much like all Elma Putty system and stuff.
Oh, okay.
Um, for the most part though, like just in general, like I would say Elma had like, and the coaches just in general had like a lot of input.
Mm.
Um, and I'm not surprised it didn't change too much because Elma wasn't necessarily coming in like trying to just like change everything. Like maybe some spots and stuff, but he was more so just trying to like with me, just trying to like connect everything, just kind of like put his own spin on some things, just improve everything, not necessarily like overly like change everything because that wasn't really what we needed.
Right.
So Alex is like always open to like any type of like input or criticism and advice. Doesn't mean he'll necessarily always want to use it because obviously he needs to have like his own system and like way of calling because he's the IGL. But in general, Alex was like always pretty open to like anything anyone was saying. Kassad would often like add some strats when he was there, and then with Elma it was less like adding strats and more just like adding more like CT setups and kind of just overall like improving our overall system rather than like certain individual strats. But I would say the coaches definitely had the ability, even me, to have like a pretty big impact and have like a lot of say. And Alex was like always someone that was like open to everything. I mean, pretty much everyone on the team was. No one was ever like against like doing what the coach says or anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to be clear, I wasn't saying Alex wouldn't. I just know that he
Yeah,
has kind of a set style, and I think it works. I think they had success with it, so I was just kind of curious what that looked like.
yeah, yeah.
So
Because with Alex, what I always liked about Alex is that he can have like that set style and still like incorporate different things with like people having more freedom within the team and
mm-hmm.
doing their own thing and stuff. So that's why Alex has always been like probably the favorite IGL I've been on a team with, just because he had such a nice like balance between everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Was there a big difference between coaching the South African lineup and the Colossus for you?
Yeah, for sure. Like with the South African lineup, it felt more like just kind of like my group of friends. I was probably helped by the fact that I actually like met them and traveled with them,
Mm-hmm.
which I never did with the Colossus team. They only had, like 1 3-day boot camp, and I wasn't
Yeah.
sent to it, which kind of sucked. Um, and so yeah, like with the Colossus team, I never met any of them. I was never in person or like traveled with that team, so it kind of felt really disconnected from it. Like it was kind of weird because like I remember the first 3 months, like we had like Flopia just like in Serbia alone, and so it was always weird to me that like Henry chose to instead have like Henry living there with like Kassad and Henry as like his two roommates when they're
Mm-hmm.
both like 35 years old, and Ricky's like a 20-year-old like living there,
Mm-hmm.
and like they never even considered to like send me to Serbia as well. Someone that had been on
Mm-hmm.
a team with Ricky and was friends with him for the past year, so that he wouldn't be standing alone. That's
Mm-hmm.
always weird to me when I look back, and I like that they never even like considered doing that. I had to like towards the end I was gonna do it because I pushed for it myself. I was like, I'll
Mm-hmm.
go to Serbia. Like I don't care. I'm fucking miserable here. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
I
I
was
was gonna
like,
I was gonna ask
please.
if you would go.
Yeah, like I wanted to go. Like I just wanted to get out of like my LA room. Um, but yeah, like it was definitely a big difference. Like I was like with a group of friends on the South African team. It felt good. I felt pretty confident in like what I had to say, like my prep and stuff. And then because I never really met anyone, because people, maybe saw necessarily, especially at the start, didn't talk to me much. Um, kind of like I didn't have, um, I like was friends with people on the Colossus team. Like I got along with everyone, but
Mm-hmm.
still, I never met them. I never like connected with them really.
Mm-hmm.
I liked all the players. I was friends with all of them. I enjoyed talking to all of them. But yeah, it was the South African team. It was just a lot easier for me, especially because at the time, like we were still traveling to events and stuff. And then C9 obviously was just online COVID, playing online. So just two like totally different environments for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that being hard too because you never met him. You weren't at the boot camp. It probably can be easy to like kind of get lost in the like, hey, like I'm still here.
Yeah, exactly.
What was the big difference between being like an assistant coach and then the head coach of Nordavind? Like
Um,
how was that whole shift for you?
yeah, it's a bit unfortunate because like as head coach in Nordavind, I got a month, and I only
Yeah.
had 4 days of practice as head coach in Nordavind.
Oh my
The entire
gosh.
other like rest of like that month and a half I was there was matches, and then
Mm.
like days off that we had to take, and then maybe like other days off that people couldn't play or something.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like I didn't really get to do anything as head coach in Nordavind. It's like the big thing was just that it was nice like having that kind of like full control. That was something I was still getting used to in terms of like having like that full input. Um, with Nordavind, like I was supposed to go to like Norway after the player break so we could like have some boot camps and stuff. And then obviously they got like new owners or whatever, and then
Mm-hmm.
decided to go that direction with like a new team. So head
Right.
coach in Nordavind. Also, I was looking forward to like at some point seeing like how the roster developed, and then maybe at one point getting to kind of like if I needed to at some point, kind of like be able to like make my own roster move because I had like roster control, and kind of like be able to like build the roster in a way that I felt I can do. Like I feel I'm good at like roster building and like knowing who would fit and like what would
Mm-hmm.
fit. And yet in my entire career, I have not been involved or had any say in a single roster change.
Mm.
In my career, like the timing has always just not worked out, or like like the Colossus team, like I didn't have like any input into like who was getting signed, like
Yeah.
learning Zeppo was joining via fucking HLTV. So it's
Oh no.
like, so it's like, yeah. So it was a bit of a transition, but I feel like it was one that I didn't really get to fully flesh out yet. So
Hmm.
I feel like I don't necessarily know yet because I was still like trying to figure out so many things with myself at the time, and I
Hmm.
hadn't, like I said, I had like 4 days of practice, so I didn't really get to implement much. It was just like match after match.
Yeah, that's brutal. That's not a lot of time.
Yeah.
So Cloud9 had some struggles. Like at least for me, in my opinion, when I would watch, I felt like a lot of their struggles were team based in the sense that it just felt that I just felt they needed a lot more time together. Like I felt like a lot of their errors were they're not watching each other's backs the way that they should, or especially with like executes, like they'd execute on a site but then not use their utility. Like they'd go in with like 4 smokes and not use one, and just kind of like struggled in that kind of area. What do you think kind of caused those issues? Was it more than potentially just time?
I think it was more than just time, yeah, because there was just a general sense, like, kind of stemming from, like the pressure on the team. Like obviously, I think more time would have helped, and like more boot camps just to get that kind of fleshed out. But it wasn't helped by like all the pressure on the team, and so kind of like the unhappy and like unhealthy environment that was kind of like building up. Um, Especially maybe with like someone like Ricky that was really struggling being in Serbia alone,
Yeah.
and it seemed like not necessarily everyone in management or just whoever necessarily understood like why Ricky was like so struggling so much, or like it was like more pretty obvious to me why he was unhappy.
Hmm.
um and so like that kind of stemmed from there. So Ricky was necessarily never really happy on the team, which kind of like infected the team environment. And then
Mm.
other than that, yeah, I think it was just the fact that it was like 5 new players that had never played together before, and there's like all this pressure to perform instantly, which is just, you know, people obviously like that kind of stems from Henry having not being able to get like Hunter and Nico, which is like his original plan or whatever. And then, but even then, it's like even if he did get Hunter and Nico, it still would have been like 5 players that never played together before, and
Right.
that pressure can easily crush a team instantly.
Hmm.
Um, and so yeah, it was just a combination of like not having enough time, like not really boot camping much, and then just expecting to like get on the ground running from day one, which is really tough to do.
Yeah.
And so I think that everything just kind of pent up, and so I felt like we had good strats. Everyone individually was like pretty good. We just hadn't really been able to like mesh and like actually be a team at any point. I felt like we
Yeah.
never really fully became like a 5-man unit. And I think like with more time and like more boot camps and like more time to like work things out, it could have eventually happened. But at the time, it was definitely a big struggle to get on the ground.
Yeah. What did you think about the pieces on the team? Do you think that like the player roles of the roster, do you think they fit well together, or do you think that eventually, like say this lineup was still going or they were offered more changes, do you think that changes could have or should have been made to just like fit pieces better together, or do you think that the roles kind of all meshed well?
On the Zeppa lineup of the team, I don't know. I felt weird about it the whole time. Like with Alex opping, then we switched to S tag opping. I think it could have worked, and we could have been like a good team with it,
Hmm.
like top 15, top 10. Um, but I think at a certain point, it would have hit like I think the ceiling of it was very low, like with S tag opping.
Yeah.
Um, so I think at a certain point, we would have just hit like a hard cap in terms of like how far we could progress with like that type of roster. And then I think at some point, I feel like at some point, I don't think the roles would have worked out long term well enough for us to roll up that exact 5. And then I
Mm.
think, yeah, I think something else would have had to have been tried, whether that would have been, I don't know, fucking Mezzy Ops or something, or like, at some point, like one of the other 3 riflers most likely, so like one like Floppy, Zeppa, or Mezzy, maybe Floppy, considering he was like the most time happy at the time, might have eventually been switched out for like an Opper at some point, just to like kind of like I think it would have sorted out the rifle roles a lot more as well.
Hmm.
Because I at the time like the 2 roles S Tag basically played on team were like star like hard carry rifle and main Opper. So like and obviously X Tag went to complexity. And he's playing like kind of like what I would have preferred for him to do. You know, playing like the role player role, like a super OP Zipnix type guy.
Yeah.
So I think at some point, I do think like some type of change would have been made to like kind of fully make the team kind of come together and mesh really well. I think that team could have worked, and we could have been pretty good. And you know, I think we would have given like every good team like always like a pretty good match. But I think in terms of like consistently closing out those matches, especially against like top 5 teams, I think that would have been tough to do with that lineup.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't said this publicly yet. I was going to talk about this in the video that comes out after this one, where I talk about just Henry and the roster and stuff. But I agree that I wonder if the right roster move would have been to let Floppy go home. Like, not because he's a bad player, but because he's miserable, and then get someone in EU who can just play from where they're comfortable. Yeah. So you kind of just pull it like, in Opper, so everyone can kind of still have their roles, and then everyone can be at home at least, and kind of just let him, even if you just bench him for a while and just like let him just be pulled out of that. Because I mean, exactly. I couldn't imagine being in a different country, like 8 hours in front or whatever of everyone you know.
Yeah, it was a bit weird because I feel like some people didn't quite understand why he was unhappy. Like, I kind of remember like there must have been some meeting where it was like we were kind of talking, and like obviously we were kind of talking about how Ricky was unhappy living in Serbia, and maybe some people didn't understand because they were like, well, you know, he's just there alone, so he should, you know, just want to play video games all day. Yeah. And I'm like, well, that's not really how it works. Like, right. It's kind of shitty when you're just playing like online matches all day. It's like you don't just want to grind Counter-Strike all day when you're just like completely alone. Like, you don't have your parents or anything. Like, you don't have your friends. You're just kind of there alone, and like your company is just like your 30-year-old coach and like your 30-year-old GM, which you don't really vibe with, right? So, yeah, like it was super tough for him. I don't understand how anyone could have really expected him to be able to like operate at like full health and full capacity in that kind of environment. And I was like kind of like in a similar boat in LA, where, you know, I still didn't really have any friends in LA, despite so many people being there, just because like I'm naturally a bit of an introvert. I kind of just have a hard time making friends. And so between that and like the weird schedule, not having any family around or anything, it was super rough just to stay motivated, especially when you're just playing like a bunch of online matches, and then like the expectations are so high that in addition to like this shitty environment that you're in, every time you play a match and lose, even though you're a new team, the entire community is just like relentlessly shitting on your team for, you know, not playing well enough. Yeah. And that even carried over from the South African C9. Like, even on the South African C9, I feel like we never got like any credit for any results. No. You know, like there was like times in online where like we had some good consistent results beating like EG and Liquid, and like no one ever really cared. It was just the consensus was that, you know, I could understand that we weren't good enough and we're never going to be enough, and I could kind of agree with that with like the roster we had. Yeah, like it was rough, like playing all these matches, being alone, Ricky being alone, the entire community just shitting on us endlessly. Like it does get to you. Like it's hard to deal with.
Yeah, I could imagine. For the South African lineup, I was just always saying like the second they were signed, at least to me, it felt like a 2-year project. It's like, okay, it's at least a year of them growing. The oldest person I think when they signed was like 20 and a half or something like that. Like, so it was like, okay, well, at least for the first year, they're all rookies. So then the second year we can start talking. And then for the Colossus, I remember after the first 2 matches, I went on like the Discord and people were talking about who they should drop Mezzi for. Yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, can this team have, you know, more than a week?
Yeah, it was insane. Like, even on like the South African team, I remember like, I think I always it's like one of those things that I kind of wonder what would have happened, because I'm pretty sure C9 was like heavily going for Grim. Me and Tion, I think we wanted to do like a 6-man roster type thing with Grim, because Grim was like lining up at that point, and obviously Liquid ended up getting him. But like, I think Grim would have fit in like much better on our team than he does on Liquid. Just being able to carry over that his fragging potential, and like his like star power potential. So that's like one thing I always kind of wonder, like, you know, if that had happened, you know, then what would have happened with everything else? But yeah, it was like, even on like the South African C9, we never got any credit for results online. Like other teams eventually kind of started getting, and you know, I could understand why they made the change, I guess, because the players didn't really seem to like want to do any type of roster change. But then like after that, it was like the pressure was on so much, and then it was just a huge struggle for everyone.
Yeah, I'm sure. For you as an analyst or assistant coach, just kind of like studying other teams, is there a difference in how you would scout a team for Alex versus the South African lineup? Like, would you look for different things to try and fit like a way that Alex's lurking could punish more, or the South African lineups executes could punish more?
Not necessarily. So kind of with anti-strats, it is kind of based off like I have to get like a good read of like what people want and what they find useful for sure. There's like things that I'm looking for. Like with Alex, one thing that he kind of showed me and kind of like I started doing more like teams having like set reactions to like maybe like losing around. Like looking more for things like I was already kind of doing this, but he was really good at it. Was say like you go down, you're playing nuke on T side, right, and you go down secret, and then the other team's reaction is always just to send the opper to start secret the round after you successfully go secret. So looking for things like that, like why teams maybe are kind of like playing off of a round. That's kind of like the main thing that kind of changed. But other than that, I usually don't change what I'm doing too much. I'm kind of just trying to get like the overall view and then like the tells. And then usually in our teams there was people were kind of always watching demos by themselves to like look for their own openings and things like that on their own spots. Just because like it's obviously a lot harder for me to like see everything in terms of like also getting the big picture of a team so that we're kind of like playing properly in the big picture. So that's kind of like what I'm always focusing on. And then yeah, like in terms of that's something I'm still trying to get more better at and like more used to is being able to take advantage of like individual plays like that with certain people. That was something I think Estetag wasn't afraid to take advantage of. Like if he saw like maybe like a weird timing or something he could take, he would like suggest it and then try to do it. So I always really like things like that. And for me, I was always more focused on like big picture and tells that are macro for the most part is mostly what I'm focusing on. So that we're playing the right overall style and like kind of like steering the team towards the right direction. And kind of getting like the best picture of like the mini map and where everyone is that we can to then like make a good decision. Just naturally kind of flow off of that. And then so yeah, but having like the experience of Alex and Estetag definitely like kind of like added to my own anti-stratting repertoire. But in terms of like how I change it too much, it's not that different. It's more just like kind of like some natural differences based on talking to them and seeing what they like, maybe seeing the format and like what kind of things they like. And also I'm like always changing like my format. That's like a big thing just based on the team. Just kind of based on like what the players are retain information best by, that's like that's a big thing that I don't think maybe some analysts don't focus on enough is like how players will actually like retain information and use it. So I'm always focused on making sure that like it's easy for them to understand what I'm trying to say, easy for them to like read it in game, things like that.
That makes total sense. Yeah, I could see that you just bombard some people with a ton of information, then they walk away with nothing.
Yeah, I got to use a lot of pictures and videos and use the least amount of words that I can, least amount of reading possible.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you've talked publicly about like the struggles of your schedule. You talked a little bit about it here. So what did your like overall schedule of being in NA look like? Like you said, you're working from 1 a.m. to 9 a.m. And then are you doing stuff outside of that too?
It was a lot of things compounding. Like obviously I'd been in LA for like a year at that point or so. And then so in addition to just, being alone there and not being able to like, so obviously like the old team had moved away. Those are like kind of the only people that I knew. I wasn't really able to see anyone else from C9 because everyone was still like quarantined in the houses and stuff. So I was just like, okay, I'm just there alone in like my little studio house or whatever. And so obviously I already had like my struggles with like depression and anxiety and ADHD, autism, the whole fucking 9 yards, whatever. And then just, already struggling with that. And then so having like the schedule as well, where if it felt weird because maybe I think that was just like almost like the worst possible schedule in like that LA time zone. Because it's like it always starts at like 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. So it's like, I felt like it was literally impossible for me to go to sleep and wake up in a way that like the sun was still out. So that kind of sucked.
Yeah.
So like it was hard to do like when I was just like living alone and like I didn't have like a pet or anything as well. So, working like 1 a.m. to 9 a.m. or 2 a.m. to whatever. It wasn't that bad. But like over the course of like doing that for like months and not traveling to like events or traveling to boot camps, I think makes it a lot worse. And then just in addition to that, it's like I'm working this like insane schedule, like I'm fucking depressed, and we're losing our matches, and the entire community is like shitting on my team, and it just
Yeah.
feels like a very helpless like situation. It's like at a certain point, I remember like especially after the losses to like Voivoda and like Windstrike, that was probably when it
Yeah.
was like at its worst. It's just like, man, it's like, why the fuck am I even doing this? Like, this is terrible. It's like the
Yeah.
schedule sucks ass. Like this community fucking sucks ass at the moment. Like they just they shit on the entire NA region as well, which is like my passion. And
Yeah.
then like they're shitting on C9 endlessly, like all my teams, and it's just like, okay, well this literally just sucks. Like, so at that point I was like, all right, well I gotta do something. So I can't just stay in LA because like, not to sound like too serious, like this like professional thing. Like I've always been very comfortable with myself, but it was like at that point, like the final month or two in LA, with C9, like working on that schedule and stuff with that team, like I genuinely was having like suicidal thoughts like every day. Like it was that bad for me, like on that schedule. I was like,
Dang, yeah.
yeah, it was really bad for me. So I was like, I need to like after OSL Pro League, I need to move back home because I'm going fucking crazy in here. And then after that, I wanted to go to Serbia so that I could, travel, see my teammates, see Eric and Ricky, who I think were still struggling because they're still just two 20-year-olds just in Serbia alone, and then
Yeah.
maybe having me there as well would help a lot more. So yeah, that was kind of like my plan at the time, just kind of like trying to get myself back in general. Obviously, things didn't pan out like that because the team eventually ended up getting dropped, but yeah, that schedule was like super rough for me. I think
Yeah.
I think it's especially rough when I don't have like anyone else around me, like real people to like bounce off of, and B, I'm not seeing my teammates at all. Like I'm not traveling at all, which I love to do. Just traveling to events, just whatever, seeing different parts of the world or whatever. Or I'm not going to events or boot camping. It's just online matches, 1 a.m. to 9 a.m. every day. Maybe do some like one-on-one sessions after practice. That'd kind of like be the only thing I had to do. Wasn't like insane or anything, but like just overall everything kind of combining just made it like a really poor experience for me.
Yeah. I could, like I said, being just so tough, just living in the dark. Everything you look at's negative. Trying to
Yeah, exactly.
find your way, not
Yeah.
seeing anybody.
Yeah, it was all just like so negative. It was like there was not really any real positives at the time. At
Yeah.
least with Nordivan, I was like kind of looking forward to like even on Nordivan, my first month as a head coach, I don't think I did like a great job. I think I was still really struggling with that, and we're kind of like recovering from that. So my goal was like, all right, this first month on Nordivan as head coach, it's just trying to sort out what I want the future of the team to be, just seeing like what I want the roles to be, what I feel of each player. And then after the break, we'll come back. Hopefully I can go to Norway, be on an EU schedule for the first time in like a year, maybe boot camp and see my teammates for like the first time in a year. Just overall be in like a much better situation at that point too. Because at that point I had already made super huge changes with like the roles in the team and like the direction I wanted to go going forward. I was kind of like, all right, we're going to give this roster like one last shot with these roles. If it doesn't work out, then after that, I'll make like a roster change or something, maybe build a roster in a way that I think would be a lot better. If it didn't work out, but obviously I never really got that opportunity. So yeah.
Are you feeling better on the having not be part of that like all nighttime schedule now?
Yeah, like even like on the East Coast is a bit better because it's usually at least like 4 a.m. or
Like
5
4,
a.m.
yeah.
Yeah, so that was still pretty tough for me. I think just because I think I'm still more than anything just want to like travel and like see teammates and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, so at the moment, like I still feel like pretty burnt out overall on CS, just because that also was like a pretty shitty thing to happen with like the timing of like getting like a month as head coach, and then
Yeah.
it was kind of like gonna have to like obviously I had like the opportunity to join like the Brazilian team El Plano, but it was like like I don't know these guys at all, and they don't seem like a type of group that I necessarily like get along with super well. Like not necessarily like that I don't like them, it's just just naturally I don't really mesh with them.
Yeah.
And there's such a huge like language and culture difference. And from talking to Kogu, it seemed more like I was just going to be like an analyst in the background. And I was like, it's just not what I want to do, So
yeah.
At the moment, I'm kind of like in between. Like I don't really know what I'm going to do next or like what I want to do next. Like I felt super burnt out over the past year or so, the past few months especially. And so just kind of like trying to take a break and kind of like rebuild myself and see, what I want to do next and hopefully actually enjoy it.
Yeah. That would be nice to be able to enjoy what you do.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like that's a good thing.
Yeah. Especially in something like this.
I know. You should be in esports for a reason, and it's not to be miserable.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're gonna have like no job security, who knows what pay?
Yeah, I got like no job security, no pay.
Yeah,
But yeah, so but still, also shout out to like the Nordivan org for treating me well when I decided I didn't want to join. They kept me on for like an extra month of my contract to give me like a little bit more salary before I do something else, go my separate way. So
that's nice.
um yeah, so the org still treated me super well. And I don't think they made like a bad decision picking up that team and like rebranding and stuff. I think it was pretty good for them,
Hmm.
for the branding and stuff. It was just unfortunate timing for me.
Was it nice for that month to? This isn't a dig at Nordovan, but to like be in the background and like be able to like work and lose, and you don't really see anything about it. Where in Cloud9, it felt like it was just like everything they did was just like an article farm, where it's like they lose and there's like 5 articles about it, and then they
Yeah,
make a roster move and there's like hundreds of, like I feel like
yeah.
Cloud9, every possible thing is in the forefront of the entire community. Was it nice to like be able to just do your work and almost be like siloed a little bit and like,
Yeah, it still felt like one thing that kind of sucked was that as I joined, like I said, I didn't have much time to practice, and we had like EU advanced playoffs like coming up. Like when I joined, the team was like 3-4 and like advanced or something. Like they lost like 4 matches in a row. They were pretty struggling because
mm,
like the team was in like the team was in a lot of turmoil when I initially joined. Like players had already been like kicked, like
oh gee,
before, and
yeah,
then they didn't end up actually getting kicked. But people wanted to kick each other, like
gotcha,
people didn't want to play with each other and shit like that. So I was like coming in and like having to like sort all this shit out,
mm-hmm,
and then having to play like advanced playoffs instantly so that we can get to MDL, because that was like kind of the only expectation the org had, was like being able to get to MDL. So we ended up playing like Akuma and Double Pony, which is like the two best teams in advanced playoffs in our bracket, who ended up making finals, and
mm,
we lost to both of them. It's like we had one bad loss to Akuma, and then from there things just kind of like instantly already like had imploded again within the team.
mm,
Um, so I was kind of like dealing with like a lot more. I was like
personnel,
dealing like with like yeah, person like inter team turmoil for the first time, kind of like that. Um, and I think it was something that in the future, depending on like what team I'm on or whatever, there's definitely something I could have taken more advantage of. Was that I still felt like this feeling of like being scared to lose a lot.
mm,
Um, myself kind of like I feel like that maybe can carry itself over from C9, but also
yeah,
just like not having a lot of experience coaching. So there's times where like I want to say something or like I want to make my own call, and I'm not doing it, and then afterwards I'm like, oh fuck, I should have done that. Like trusted my gut.
mm-hmm,
So it's like kind of like a big thing that I wish I could have had more time with that and use that more, just to not be so afraid to lose, because it's like you're playing like fucking these EU teams play like 10 matches a day, so you're gonna lose some of them. No one really cares. It's just how it is.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, it definitely felt. I like being kind of like in the forefront, just in general. Like I like feeling like people are following my team and either cheering for it or booing it. Um, I wouldn't mind necessarily the whole C9 thing, like and how like the community treated it. It was just combined with everything else. It was pretty rough. Um, and, I
yeah,
can I understand where that comes from. I'm never gonna say like fans should never like talk shit on other teams or like talk about what they feel a team should do, like a roster change or something, because that's part of the fun of like following the sport, right? Is
yeah,
having your say and like things like that. So um yeah, it was just kind of sucked at the time, but overall I would say it would have been beneficial to have like be in the background, like you said, on Nordavans for that month. But actually in general I kind of prefer like having a team that people like and follow. That was like the biggest reason I was considering actually joining Oplan, on seeing where it went, because there's like a big fan base and
mm-hmm,
there's a lot of people following and interacting with it. And for me, kind of like where my passion and motivation generally stems from, more so than just enjoying Counter Strike as a game, because I do, but it's not like I like intensely love the game itself or something. But for me, it's about just the sport itself, like the scene, like the show of it, like being able
yeah,
to like these lands and like the arenas and stuff is like what I always just kind of like live for. The big show of it. You know what I mean?
yeah,
The little mini like universe that like kind of spawns around a sport with stories and personalities and things like that. That's what I'm always like super intrigued by, and why I
yeah.
love doing what I do.
Yeah, like the hype, the highs, the lows, the competition,
Yeah,
the yeah. I
yeah.
I
So it's like, even though at the moment it does kind of suck, hopefully right now it's just like a low before another high.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how it's always going to be on any team. There's probably going to be more lows than there are highs on any team, just because you generally are going to end the tournament by losing.
Right.
That's always going to sting. But throughout my career, I don't want to just only feel only highs and just win all the time. It's like, eventually I got to have like a liquid MLG Columbus loss where it's just rips your soul out and just tears you out.
Yeah.
It's like eventually I feel like I got to feel that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join me. I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate just all the time you've given me since you joined Cloud9 with the South African lineup. Is there anything that you want to promote for yourself? Are you doing anything that's coming up?
I don't have any necessary set plans at the moment. I'm probably just kind of chilling. I might try just diving into making some kind of like anti-strat content on my own YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's something that I'd be good at. Be pretty interesting. Maybe just like focus on certain teams, like a few teams here and there. Maybe show like tells that I see and like how maybe I would use them, or certain things that I would like to use in like a team system. Just maybe like more short, like 10-minute videos, 8-10-minute videos, things like that. Just kind of like breaking down a team's like CT set or something, like how I would play against it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's kind of like what I would like to do at the moment. I think that's what I'll do. I'll kind of probably start off in like CSGO doing stuff like that, and then maybe do more like Valorant content like that. Just kind of like stretch my, kind of show that like because I am generally, I would say overall as a game I probably still prefer Counter Strike more, but Valorant does interest me, and I do enjoy Valorant and following it in the scene, and so I like both games. So I want to be able to have a reputation in both, and
Mm-hmm.
kind of for the future of my career, even if I go to Valorant now, it's like I don't want to like never go back to CS. I feel like as a coach or analyst, I have that kind of privilege that players don't. That I feel it's a lot easier for me to go back and forth between the two games than like it would be for a player. So I want to take advantage of that, just to be able to keep my options open and see what comes.
Yeah, that's awesome. Just very quickly, do you see a lot of similarities between stratting teams or analyzing teams between CS and Valorant? Like, are you able to, or is it just vastly different?
I think it's pretty similar. There's like certain aspects of Valorant in terms of like how you can anti-strat someone with certain ults and abilities that I haven't fully fleshed out myself, in terms of like how you can use things like maybe like like Sylva's ult, for example, where you can just shoot through an entire fucking map with his
Yeah,
ult or
right.
whatever. It's like you can use something like that to anti-strat, or like if you see like a tell and you know where they are, things
Mm-hmm.
like that. Whereas in Valorant, there's more opportunities to kind of like take the fight directly to someone
Mm-hmm.
with abilities and stuff to kind of like really play and like anti-strat something.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in CS, it's more like reading it and then trying to have like a numbers advantage and like rotate your players to like have a good setup to counter like the execute, whenever it comes in, things like that. So with Valorant, it's pretty similar, I think, but there are like very large differences in terms of things that you can do against a team, or things that maybe they can do to kind of like fake you out and stuff. But all the time in Valorant, I'm still paying attention to like how people are like using their abilities and utility compared to CS. And
Mm-hmm.
I do see like a lot of similarities in terms of like how I would build a structure and system and things like that. So overall, I think it's not too different.
Yeah, yeah. I'd be curious to see if you do go down the Valorant route. I'd be curious to see if doing both could kind of open your eyes to be better at one or the
Yeah,
other.
exactly. Yeah, I definitely think there's things I could like learn in Valorant and see, and then take that to CS in terms of like applying like the same principles and things. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, whatever I do next, just trying to like rebuild myself and get excited for it to do it.
Well, thank you again. I'll leave all your socials and your YouTube and stuff down below.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for joining. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you again to Josh for taking the time to join me for the interview. Tune in next week for part 10 and the season finale of Cloud9, A Look Back.